Hi, I'm Clay Flieger, and we're going to rebuild the engine on this 1962 Oldsmobile 98. The reason we're doing this rebuild is the engine has quite a bit of blow-by, which you can see some of it right here coming out of the breather cap. And it also has quite a bit of oil consumption, and, you know, frankly, it smells kind of bad, which is no fun. So we want it to be fun, and that's why we're going to rebuild it. First thing we're going to do is disconnect the drive shaft from the rear differential. Then we're going to remove it from the back of the transmission, and we're going to drain the transmission oil and the engine oil as well. We're working underneath the car using jack stands, but I think we'll have enough clearance, and you know, a clean driveway and some cardboard here is going to help out quite a bit. So I've disconnected these nuts right here, the universal joint, and here they had these tabs that had bent down for them, and we'll try to get the drive shaft out. Well, I was not able to get the drive shaft to come out because it wouldn't slide forward far enough to disengage from the U-joint from the rear axle there. I think it might be because this transmission is actually from a 64 rather than a 62, and we may be having some clearance problems with the yoke. So the first round of this wrestling match went to the car, but we'll be pulling the engine and transmission out together hopefully, and that will disconnect the drive shaft from the other direction. This flattened cardboard is really great as far as making it easier to be underneath there and to catch some of the drips. With some luck, we'll have the engine out today. I did get all the fluids out with Ava's help yesterday, and you know, of course there's some left in the engine and everything. The radiator will be coming out first, then all the breakables on the top of the engine before we hook it up and disconnect it from the bottom. Right now I'm working on getting these transmission cooler lines disconnected. Got one of them, the other one's not in the most convenient spot. Got a special kind of wrench for that reaches all the way around the nut on the fitting. So you'll probably notice about this car is here's this cross member right here just behind the bell housing, and that's actually the engine mount. The engine mounts to that rather than in the middle like more modern cars. Then it also mounts up there on the front underneath the damper, and I'm sure that this is going to make it both easier and harder, and I might have to get a little bit more clearance. Might have to jack this thing up a little bit higher. Okay, so we've got the radiator out. Also took off the accessories and the air cleaner, of course, and we're getting ready to take off the carburetor and distributor wires and get after the linkage. It's going to be important to keep that straight. I also secured the fuel line. Always good to be careful with gasoline. The transmission cooler lines are loose, but they weren't going to come out on their own, and the exhaust pipe down there is disconnected. So once we get some more of these details, then it's going to be a matter of attaching some chains to the thing, disconnecting the mounts, and actually seeing if we can move it. Oh yeah, another big thing, we're going to have to take the hood off. So now we have the engine hoist hooked up and the load leveler in place. I went ahead and put some head bolts through the links, and so it should connect up pretty well. It's already connected up and tightened down, so it should work out pretty well. I went ahead and disconnected the engine mount on the front as well as on the back. Once we get this thing supported on the hoist, then I'll go ahead and take the cross member loose, and then it'll be fully supported just on the hoist, and we'll work it out. Okay, so now we got the drive shaft out. And what made the difference? Well, it wasn't able to slide forward enough to get it out before, but I think it had a lot to do with the fact that the engine mounts, both front and rear, are pretty much shot. So the engine and transmission weren't actually sitting where they should have been and didn't give me the clearance that I needed. So I went ahead and pulled it out now that they've moved a little. And this is the reason why they've moved a little. I've had this thing hooked up to the hoist and applied tension to it and made sure that all sorts of stuff is disconnected on the bottom and check for clearance and so forth. And in doing so, I think reposition the engine and transmission just a little bit, enough for me to get that drive shaft out. I went ahead and reinforced how this was connected here using these washers, attaching them to the head bolts or studs. So this is in here nice and solid, and we've got the load leveler going on. You know, some of the limiting factors are this hoist comes up pretty close to the bumper. It only gives me so much reach in there. So if I have to pull the engine up and then take the transmission separately from it, we can do that. We're just gonna have to see how this goes, you know, as we pull it up a little bit at a time. There'll be some more fluids that'll spill as it moves and gets positioned differently. So I got a couple of tubs ready for all that. And this pallet, that's where I'm gonna set it down, both temporarily when it's time to separate the engine and transmission, and then I'll be able to use that pallet in the bed of my pickup truck when I take the engine to the machine shop, and it'll probably be where the transmission winds up living while we're taking care of the engine. So the load leveler is really working for us. We're pulling the front of the engine up and drop the transmission back. I went ahead and got the cross member out of the way. As you can see, it's hanging back down here with a big catch basin because it's going to leak some stuff. And we'll see how this wrestling match goes. Okay, so I took the car back down with the engine up, and we've just about run out the load leveler to point it up. And it looks like we're working adequate clearance to get this thing out of here. Relax a second. Now it's where it's going to be more fun. Cranking on this level. That'd be good. Well, we're not
going to use this load leveler again. Right. It's recutting its own. It almost looks like it's recutting its own threads, but well, maybe not.
Hey, there's a tube of assembly lubricant. Go back a couple inches. All right. Okay. Okay, so now it's out. This thing is big. Holy Toledo. It's bigger than I thought. But the next step is to go ahead and separate the transmission from the engine at the bell housing, and then get the engine onto the engine stand for disassembly. There was a lot of work in this load leveler, lifting it up, pulling it a little bit, and so on. Some things that made it a little more complicated was this concrete driveway is not in the greatest of shape, and we're also pulling it uphill, which was not exactly easy, but lowering the car down helped a lot. But notice how much it came up once the load was off of the front suspension. And we can see in here, not only is it dirty, but that front engine mount is completely gone. Obviously that'll have to be replaced. There's enough room in there, you could put a freaking over-the-road diesel in there if you wanted to. Holy smokes.